Okay, hello everyone. My name is Gary Polinsky. I am the chapter leader for the St. Louis SQL Server and Business Intelligence user group. I'm joined here today with Julie Bloomquist, who's also a chapter leader. Say hi, Julie.
Hello. Welcome, everyone.
And welcome everyone as well. So today we have a great presentation. Murali Subramanian is back for part 2 of his Power BI and Healthcare series. And today he's going to be talking about data modeling for healthcare and Power BI. And this presentation will be really valuable for anyone, regardless of what industry you're in. You don't necessarily have to be in healthcare to get a lot of value out of this. I certainly got a lot of value out of Murali's first presentation. And by the way, that first presentation is recorded and it's out on the Meetup site. You should be able to get to it from the homepage of the Meetup site, and there should be a link under the general description about the group. Before we get to the action with Murali, just wanted to talk a little bit about things going on. Next month's meeting is on Tuesday, May 10th. It's a lunchtime meeting. I'll be posting information and sending out invitations about what the topic and speaker will be. Good news regarding events happening. I was going to say post-pandemic, but things are changing. People are having in-person events again. On 4/30, there's a SQL Saturday in Haiti. On May 14th, there's one in Jacksonville, and on June 4th, there's one in Croatia, all over the world. Fantastic stuff. I'm excited to tell you now that we are also looking at having a SQL event here in St. Louis. We've in the early stages of planning for a fall event, and it looks like it will probably be at the Microsoft Technology Center, which is now opening up for in-person events. So super excited about that. It's been 2 years since we've had one. So I'm really excited about that. And we have a job opportunity at my employer, Covenant Technology Partners. Our data analytics group is looking for data engineers and data analysts. We are accepting applicants with all levels of experience from junior to senior. Covenant Technology Partners is a Microsoft Gold partner, and we work primarily with analytic tools like Azure Synapse and Power BI, but experience on other platforms such as Snowflake or Tableau is welcome. If you or someone you know is interested, please message me on the user group Meetup site. And about today's presentation, as I mentioned, this is the second part of Murali's 2-part series on Power BI and healthcare. And some of the key concepts that he's going to cover today include how they've implemented the star schema, incremental refresh, calculation groups, row level security, and object level security. About Murali. Murali is a senior BI engineer at SSM Health. He has over 11 years of experience in BI reporting and analytics using SAP Crystal Reports, including a year and a half of Power BI experience. He has performed data modeling, warehousing, ETLs and ELTs using Oracle and SQL Server, creating and maintaining SSIS packages. Murali has certifications in Epic and knowledge of data models in some of their clinical EMR like Inpatient, Lab, and Radiology. Please welcome Murali Subramanian.
Thank you so much, Gary. let me take over sharing. I am going to start over a little bit from where we stopped last time, just so that we have a kind of restart. Because I know we did a previous version of this. Sorry, you're gonna see a random SQL screen. Give it a second. All right, so you guys should be able to see my screen now.
Yep.
Okay, so again, thank you for the initial bio and basics, background, everything about this meeting, and also myself. Again, I'm gonna say a couple of real quick things that might be a little redundant. When we do have this item available on YouTube, you might be able to view it there as well, and we'll try and create some chapters so it's easier to navigate back and forth. The Power BI for healthcare, like Gary said, I'm really glad to hear that feedback, that it's helped a little bit for non-healthcare. And I feel like that would be the case for non-healthcare as well. If you're dealing with big data, we're probably going through the same kind of challenges. So even though I say the intended audience, it is not only inclusive. That there's so much more roles that can be that can benefit from this from these two parts. So again, going through this, one of the key things. I think this is the first time I'm going to tell anybody. I just got promoted today, so I am no longer a senior. I'm a lead. And I do have 11 plus years of experience in BI, SQL Server. SAP used to be our main tool, and now we're transitioning close to 2 years of Power BI. The one thing is, with this transition also, we're trying to do a few other things in the back end. So we do work with Azure Databricks, using Python notebooks and various ingestions using API calls and stuff like that, which is new to our team. And also storing it in Azure SQL database. So those are a couple of items that are getting added to my suite of experience tools here. In data modeling, warehousing, ETLs, ELTs using SSIS are now using ADF. And he mentioned about the EMR, which is Epic. If you guys are familiar with it, or healthcare data, inpatient lab radiology are stuff that you're familiar with. Again, the amount of data itself is humongous for healthcare, and the regulations, probably like finance sector, like MasterCard or any Visa or any bank like Wells Fargo, they are highly regulated, just like how healthcare is. So I feel like if you're in one of those sectors, you feel how interesting it is to go through the role level security and other things. I'm going to talk about it a little bit. Again, all the commonalities, not just for healthcare, but beyond healthcare. Having said that, with all this, I have had various mentors and everything. In this particular case, I do have a shout out for the Power BI community. Microsoft Docs is one of the main biggest source. All of us can use this. Real quick, at the end of this, I'll also send both of the slides so it can be posted along with the YouTube video and on the meetup. And I will also give out my contact details to Gary so he can upload it in both the places too. These, in this particular slideshow, you can also, there's also links. So when you do get this, you'll be able to click and go to those links and find more information. But just generally, Microsoft Docs or Guy in a Cube, they are a great channel. And SQL BI, the Italians. They're amazing. So they Cube and SQL BI are my main go-to places for Power BI related content, and also Chris Webb's BI blog. And we had a thing with P3 Consulting who came in and did some DAX and advanced DAX training. And I don't want to make this sound too much like I'm selling or talking about them or trying to sell their product or anything, but it's just our Power BI journey would not be complete, or it's the place that we are in a matured situation because of all these resources, and actually even some beyond this. All the guidelines that we came up with, all the best practices we came up with is all like from some of these or most of these resources. So if you guys are looking for something like that too, please feel free to take a look at any of these resources. Very helpful, very helpful. And also, like SQL Server, and I know I should talk about a real quick shout out to our nearby MVP, who's Kathy. She has been a great mentor for the SQL part of it, for all the SQL stuff that I've learned. So again, I'll go through the next couple of slides really quick because you guys have seen this in the previous part, but I do want to still kind of give an idea for people who are seeing this again. So we're transitioning from all these SAP, ClickView, and Cognos products to Power BI. So our end goal of this Power BI migration at SSM Health, at the end of this project, this humongous project, is take out all these other tools and go strictly Power BI. So having said that, how in some cases it may or may not work for you guys. You might want to hold on to one tool that fits your needs and stuff like that. But for us, we decided as an organization, we want to go into Power BI. Most of our tools and stacks are all Microsoft products. So taking out all the non-Microsoft items, and we're just going into Microsoft product. In this particular case for BI, it's Power BI. Yeah, all these you guys have seen somewhere. That means, that's just from where we're moving. We've used all these tools and moving into Power BI stack using desktop, report builder, and report server.
Hey,
And
Murali.
again,
Hey, Murali, it's Gary. First off, do you want to need to save questions for later, or should we ask when raise our hands and I'll let you know, or type it in the chat?
Yeah, if people want to type it in the chat, they're more than welcome to. I will every demo. I mean, I don't have extensive demos, but for every I'll have strategic pauses for it, so I can take the questions.
Okay, I have a quick question. When you say you migrated to Power BI, were you just repointing reports to the same sources?
No, but that's a great question. 2 slides down, we'll start with all that. That's I would 5 minutes later, that would have been a great segue for my next slide.
We'll get our timing down together. This is only our second. This is only our second
Okay.
show.
Yes. Yeah. If this is a success, we'll have another season or another session.
Season. I like season better.
Like a TV show. Yeah. So thank you, Gary. I'll definitely talk about that pretty soon. Again, one of the things about, I spoke about this in the previous time too. Challenges, some of the challenges. One major thing was, moving from Excel to Power BI, because whatever we were creating in our previous tools, even though we had the power of the tool itself, eventually it ended up being an Excel export. Somebody else would have to look at it, and they would do aggregation and reporting on top of what we were supplying them. So that is the biggest challenge when we had to like change our mindset and the mindset of the end user and say, hey, we can free up a ton of your time. Please let us do that. This is what we do the best. So, and then also, when you are used to a specific tool like ClickView or SAP, they're used to certain features that when we move from tool to tool might not work exactly the same way, but identifying the ultimate goal of any data and analytic solution is the key to transitioning all those solutions into a newer product. And I mean, it's easier. It's definitely easier said than done. Not any particular fault of anybody. It's just how transitions or migrations or changes generally happen, and it's a lot of steps that needs to go in between to accomplish it. But it's definitely possible. So again, this is another slide from last time. I've shown this before. I cleaned it up a little bit, but for the Power BI guidelines we came with, I just grabbed a few that made most sense for me to show in my when I spoke about this. We do have like one main guideline document that's like 25 or 30 pages long, and then we have some best practices. We have template documents. We have a ton of documents that initial like 6 months we spent a ton of time researching and documenting everything that would work best for our situation. And again, one quick key thing I do want to point out is from a healthcare perspective, also from our organization, what we decided worked best was to create a data set, a Power BI data set, and then create reports off of that data set. So that way we could reuse the data sets, and the amount of data used or stored or the compute whenever you're using a UI or anything would be very minimal, and it could be a single import source from a Power BI data set. So keep that in mind. Again, some of these guidelines are going to be the key part of today's session. I know last session was a little bit more geared towards the BI part of it. This time it's going to be a little bit both BI and the backend parts of it. Again, last time I did mention this too. It is very essential for all pieces, all people involved in all the pieces of this solution, right? From data engineering, like people who are working with there are specific people working for data ingestion or data engineering or analysis. Any part of your solution, if they are aware of the end-to-end overview of what a tool can do, especially Power BI that we're talking about today, will be very helpful to create those solutions appropriately in their part. So what does that mean? So some of these initial items, like performing the transformations before loading data into data set, data modeling should be efficient. So I mean, sorry, one of the key things I'm diving into this while I'm diving into this session is I'm hoping you already have an assumption or understanding of Power BI. You already have some understanding of the data warehouse techniques or data ingestion piece, or if it's SQL, Azure, Oracle, whatever source that you guys use, doesn't matter. So those are all things that you guys already know, understand how it works, little or a lot. But for our case, Power BI is a tool that can do everything from end to end. It's almost like a full stack. So if you give it an application, it could ingest, it could do an API call, ingest data, clean it up, create data models, create transformations, have schedules to run, do incremental refresh, put data out in a UI, have great visualization. So It's almost like an end-to-end tool. People are not too worried about, having only Java or JavaScript or anything like that being used. But Power BI can do a ton of things. Identifying what you want your Power BI piece to do would decide how the performance of your Power BI service is. So again, in our case, our Power BI service production environment has a P3 capacity, which is 100 gig. It goes to both like per data set, 100 gig for data set storage size, and also when it's refreshing the refresh data size. So if you have a lesser, and we are on premium capacity, so not per user or anything, but premium capacity. So depending on what kind of capacity you have, some of these might alter how you want to have your solutions and backend, so on and so forth. So again, performing transformations and query folding and avoiding native query are some of the guidelines that are out here. Basically, I mean, again, with the assumption that you guys know Power BI already. So whenever you're doing all the applied steps and things like that, eventually we just want Power BI the Power Query to just go and grab data from the data source. In our organization, that's what we are hoping it would do. And it would have very less transformations within the data set. It would do everything back there on the source, any calculations, everything, aggregations, everything, as much as possible to be done on the source. So it comes to Power BI data set, and we use that, we store the data set, and then we use the storage engine and the Power of the Formula engine too, and we create UIs, so using partitions, so that the UI can appropriately access the data in the backend, especially with big data. You need partitioning and things like that. So all these go hand in hand. Again, incremental refresh is the part of the partitioning that I will show in a little bit. But I mean, as you guys see, the next slide, one of the key things for the backend piece, which is the star schema. Some of the initial steps which said, do perform all your transformations before loading the data into the data set. So in the data source, do everything. Data modeling should be efficient for reporting and analytics. So performing that, having a star schema is key to achieving a performant and efficient Power BI solution. And it's even after going through some of the recommendations, and we tried something different, we stumbled, we struggled, and we experienced changes. We experienced issues, and then we implemented changes, and we learned from it. So these were some of, again, not just recommendations from others, but also some things that we had to go through ourselves. So that's why performing transformation data source is a lot ideal and what we try to push. So in this, I'm not giving you how a star schema itself looks, but how you want to put data from a data source to Power BI, how the data interact, or how the data movement is. So for instance, here you can see a little bit of extra space outside the stored procedure. Even though I'm calling it a stored procedure, this could be any data ingestion process that you have. Now, we could have a notebook, a Python notebook, or a SQL notebook, or a Scala notebook, whatever you're doing using Azure Databricks. That could be this piece of data source on the data source instead of stored procedure. Whatever that transforming ETL processes that you have. In our case, most of these we use a stored procedure. We get central data. In our case, it's Epic. So Clarity is the data model that it's a powerful, huge, like 10,000 plus set of tables that we have turned on. There are over 40,000 tables. It's extreme. But we use some custom stored procedures to figure out what that data slice should be. I could call this custom table, But it's a bunch of tables. We create a data warehouse around it, just so it doesn't like scare you or it doesn't alienate you. I'm just using these terms interchangeably. But if you have a separate team that does data warehousing, ask them to take care of this data source, this purple part. That's their end. They will have to do that. And some of the changes that you see or that I'm going to talk about here would mean, or we'll talk about why or how that can be implemented. This blue part is the part that most Power BI either developers would be able to do most of it. So in some cases, admins might have to help you out too. But so going back into this stored procedure or Azure Databricks notebook, whatever the ingestion process, you want to cleanse, aggregate that data at the data source and put it in a custom table or like a Delta table, whatever it is. So this extra piece is saying that in this particular type 1, method 1, I would say, stored procedure is housing all that necessary logic to figure out what changes in the data. Is the data doing only inserts? Sometimes you need only inserts in your data set. You don't care about updates or deletions. Sometimes you need updates and deletes. Deletes are a little bit more easier. Updates are the hardest part, especially for healthcare, especially in our situation where a lot of healthcare actually even things change. Coding and abstraction happens like 3 months, 6 months after somebody left the hospital. So what that means is their data is not the tables that hold this data in the back end in Clarity. It is still constantly changing 6 months after somebody left somebody got discharged from their hospital. So identifying what your solution is, identifying when or how often, how much I have to look back and refresh my data is key, and doing it in the stored procedure part is key. Again, this is doing it in the stored procedure, putting it in a table. So your Power BI data set can look at that table and do a point and grab. That's your ideal solution. And then you use a report, you do an import. So when you do the Power BI data set, you do an import mode. So everything is stored in the service. Quickly, your UI talks back to the data set, and your storage engine, your formula engine tells, hey, go and get this, grab this, select star, whatever, from the AS cube level, and then your imported data comes back beautifully when it's partitioned and things like that. So again, if you're partitioning, nice thing on the data source, if you partition, that might help you do this part very quickly when it's coming into your data set. When you partition your data set, this particular blue part from data set to report will be faster. So that is the first method. I know I'm hearing a little bit of background. I don't know if there's a question. I could take a quick pause and see if there are any questions, Gary.
Yay, yes, we got a lot. We have 3 questions.
Okay.
This is good. Did you use or leverage Power BI embedded in your work?
We did not use Power BI embedded. We could have used it. Our first goal was to make sure we transitioned the users from using a different tool to Power BI, and then we wanted to start leveraging the features of embedding stuff into Power BI and also embedding Power BI in other applications like Teams or stuff like that. So we did not use it.
Oh, okay.
But that's, again, one step at a time. We're trying to get to that at a different level, at a different time.
Okay.
Thank you for that question.
Okay, I have another question. Is there a good way to migrate from Click to Power BI?
Quick is everything. I mean, I don't want to give a consultant answer, but basically that's what it is. When it depends on the amount of it depends on everything. Like I mentioned about the mindset of the end users, because eventually who you are trying to do this for is your end users. If they are able to get the features and if they are able to be satisfied with whatever solution you're able to give Power BI rather quickly, then you can do that very quickly as well using Power BI. However, I would suggest having a specific time frame to go through all these guidelines, like I mentioned initially, so you can internally like retrospect your own organization a lot and how they have been using your current tool. It could be Click, it could be anything. Retrospect how that tool is being used. And then based on that, you can set the guidelines, you can set expectations for your customer, for your end users. And then that would help you churn out all the analytics tools as quickly as you want. And also, again, that the end user mindset, if you're able to identify a lot of power users, depending on your user community, if they're savvy with things like this, you can open up the data set to them so they can just build their own reports. Again, depending on how your current tool is being used, how your user community is. If you're able to do those kind of things and open it up to the end users, they might be able to just build all those reports themselves. It might be a lot faster. So it depends on all those factors and how your team is also. Do you have like a separate warehouse team? How strict are they on changes, and how much do you have to do it on Power BI, and how your capacities and things like that. So if all those are at ideal conditions, I think you can do it fairly quickly.
Yeah, and I mean, my experience as well, Murali, has been that, it depends on the, like you said, the consultant answer is it depends, but it does really depend on the complexity of the source report, um, and but I'm not familiar with any tools that automate that, like from Click or from Tableau or that sort of thing.
That's
Are
right.
you? Yeah.
You're correct. I don't know of a tool that does a data wizard kind of, or a wizard kind of migration, like how you could migrate from SSIS to ADF or something like that. There's not I don't believe there's a tool. Now, somebody out there might benefit from doing a tool like that. I don't know. It's a good question.
Okay, we have one more question.
Sure.
Did you convert the stored procedures to Databricks code in a notebook? If so, could you provide those steps?
So I think maybe I'll have to do that as a separate one. We did not do a one-to-one stored procedure to Databricks. For Databricks, the parts that we were doing, so currently our Databricks usage is to avoid some of the manual things that we have been doing. For instance, we would go into CDC or um, um, vendor websites. I don't know if I can say the vendor names here, but CDC or other vendors that we work with who give us risk-adjusted data back. So they do some calculations like cancer registries or like survey data and stuff like that. So when we get those data, sometimes, I mean, our vendors don't have APIs, or they don't send us data files. They don't SFTP files to us. So for those kind of things, we are trying to, where currently someone is going into their website, they have a login, so they go in, they manually pull data out, get an Excel sheet or CSV, and they send it to us. We use that in our process. So that piece is where we're starting right now. We're kind of automating those. We're only using it for automation of external manual process at this time, but we're trying to also start flipping all the internal processes to that way. So again, some other future time, definitely. Thank you. That's a good question.
Okay, thanks, Murali. That's all the questions we have for now.
All right. Thank you. All right, let me go to the next part of this, which is this is the method one that I was talking about, where you do that solution, knowing what Power BI is capable of and doing that point and grab so that it is efficient for your own solution. But sometimes there are cases where you don't have the permissions to do that. You don't have the access. You don't have the resources to do that. So you get a bunch of tables. So that's your data source. You're told that there's nothing much you can do about it. So then you just directly connect your Power BI data set, and you can see this little bit of extra fluff there that is not really fluff, but the extra bit of white space, which is kind of to tell you that some calculation, additional transformations happen on the Power Query side, and also probably calculated DAX or create custom or created tables that you create within the data set itself has to happen for it to work better, just because you don't have the access to those. So if it's a little inflexible for you to do things in the data source, or even in certain cases, if it's a stopgap measure where you have to create this transformation piece in your data set before a data warehouse update can happen, because of the quick turnaround time that we have to do on our projects. This second method works. It's not ideal. The first is the preferred and ideal method. Second one works, but again, that means the mashup engine in the Power BI service will have to do a lot more work to try and grab the data. If it is coming from an on-prem source, then your gateway server has to be big enough to hold that entire data. So for instance, our data, we had to increase the gateway server size because our data sets were just pretty huge. Big data, of course. So when we had to get our data through, it has to sit until all that transformation happens in the data set. So it would time out frequently. And the data set evictions would keep happening because of the fact that our gateway server was not big enough to handle the data that we were trying to pull from an on-prem source. So all these kind of things, again, it's almost like Jenga, or what is that stacking thing? I think it's Jenga. You try to pull one thing, you have to balance it very well. Knowing something that you pull out of the stack may tip everything over. So we have to be careful what transformations we're doing, where we're doing, how we're trying to accomplish this. And again, the data movement from dataset and Power BI report is the same. And again, this is for our case. In some cases, and this is not the only method for in our case, it is recommended that it is the main method. It is the recommended guideline to do data set separately and report separately. We do accept outliers, but we don't want it to be the mainstream. If there is a justifiable reason to have an outlier where the data set and report in the same PBIX file, we do let it. So then these two are a little bit more simpler in that case, or complex, whichever side of the sword you want to look at it from. The third method is a hybrid method. It's pretty much doing both. In some cases, certain things can only happen in the Power BI service, so you still have to do those calculations on the Power BI service. So for instance, if you're trying to have some Unicode characters or that you do using DAX, those kind of calculations changes would have to happen on the data set side. There's no way you can put it on a database which holds like a Unicode. I mean, you can do some of it as Unicode on the database, but again, a lot of things, it's a lot harder to have that Unicode characters and whatever else. That I don't want to go too much in depth about that. Some cases you might want to keep some aspects of it in the data set, some calculations, some aggregations in the data set, but have the stored procedure do most of the calculation. Again, one other case is where you could have like the same table that's detail level and also aggregated. So the aggregation could just happen in the data set, but the table itself the same table. So you're pulling table 1 as a table as it is, which has all the detail rows. Then you are also joining it to table 1 with some level of aggregation based on the dates or the provider, or whatever slice you're trying to do, like a ministry or location, whatever slice, whatever grouping that you're trying to do for the aggregation. That's the 3 methods that we try to implement star schema. And of course, you guys, I'm assuming that you guys know star schema, how to implement and everything. So that's the best method. And one quick detail also I want to mention as I'm talking about star schema, whenever we're doing the data modeling, it would be better for the solution to have dimensions and facts created such a way that you always go one to many instead of doing many to many, and as much single direction instead of bidirectional filtering and everything going on. Now I know I spoke a lot. I do want to give a quick minute and see if there's any other questions before I show a couple of things.
No questions in the
No
chat, Murali.
All right, let me quickly go over to that item. So I mean, I did show stored procedure and custom table and stuff like that. So some parts of these, I mean, there's not any, again, PHI or anything. Just this is a stored procedure, just the back end of it that I created with some basic stuff. It's probably like hundreds of lines of code doing like updates and inserts and updates. So again, this is just like a basic idea. I'm not going to go into depth on what I'm doing here, why I'm doing certain things, but just to give you an idea that there are some, this is one of those stored procedures that is doing all the calculation. It is figuring out what I am trying to insert and update. In this particular case, this PBIDS is our admin, med-admin, and again, this is something we create the fact table and our naming conventions. So I just randomly threw PBIDS so that it'll be Power BI data set related fact table. So and then you say whatever that is used for, like medication administration in this case. Subject matter and so on and so forth. So coming up with good naming convention. So we keep that up for quickly understanding what data set it's being used for and things like that. But also in this case, you can see that I am using that table. I am using logic from our source tables to figure out what has to be updated, if something has to be updated or not. I mean, you could do this multiple ways, like you could do a merge match and stuff like that. It's totally up to you. In this particular case, again, just for various reasons, I'm not going to go into depth about that right now, unless there's a question. But there's inserts and updates separately, calling them out in the bottom that says, so I have like a flag and everything. Basically, putting your logic here, saying what are the things that I want? What are the things that changes in my data? What are the things that I want to tag? What are the things that cause that update that I want to tag? So when I speak about that tagging term, again, this I did mention in my previous call too. We have two columns, which is record create date time and record update date time, which we will see in just a minute why. But as you can see, it's used to identify and tag like a core date field in your data set, in your logic. One of the quick key things also, as you can see, I mean, I have commented this out for a different reason. I'm not going to go into that right now, but you can see that I've casted it as date, even though it might come as a date time field. So yeah, a quick thing, if you have date time fields, you can use it to do your incremental refresh and things like that, but create a separate date time field. It has to be a date time field, but just keep the date part of it. So I always, this field in the table itself is a date time field, but it only has date part in it. There's just to reduce the cardinality and partitioning to increase the performance for those aspects. This will be very helpful. Just keep that in mind. Again, if you are only a developer of the Power BI aspect of it and you want your data warehouse to be built efficiently for your data set to work, please talk to your data warehouse person. Tell them I need these tagged. I need these tagged based on not when the, I mean, even though I called it record create date time, sorry, it's a little misleading, but your core date or date time field that you're trying to capture in your data set. Every data set at some level, even aggregated data set, has some level of date in it. So use that, leverage that, so you can create partitions and tag and create your data set in a very efficient way. Again, there are tons of things like this in the bottom of the stored procedure. Again, all the calculations and everything. I'm not gonna go in depth about that. Just so you know, you can do it. If this is an on-prem one, I do have some examples on Azure database that we do too. And just a quick thing too, all these load tables, they are all for PBI, DS, or Power BI data set. So we created a ton of them. And also we have some Azure ones as well. That is the star schema backend. Let me quickly show one of my.
Is this a good time for a question?
Sure, if there's a question, go ahead, please.
Yeah, the question is, I know you mentioned about one-to-many relationships, but in healthcare, there are so many to-many relationships. How did you handle them?
That is a very good question. So again, remember that piece where I said here, this part where, I do this in the stored procedure. So one of the things you could do in the stored procedure, if you're going through this method one, is that you dedupe it in a certain way. You create a bridge table in your data source. I'm calling it a bridge table, but the table that goes in between your fact table and your dimension to make it a one-to-many relationship. I do have some specific examples in mind. Maybe at the end of this, if I can find one where I don't have any data showing for it, I might be able to show it. But yeah, you can create bridge tables either in the data source, preferably again, or you can even create it in the data set. In one of my cases, what I did when it was many like that, I took some of the key, and this one, it was in the initial stages of the Power BI dataset creation, so I did it in the dataset. If given an opportunity, I would have done it in the data source. So what I did was took all the key ID columns that were necessary for the aggregation, and all those fields I took out, and I made that as a distinct list. and a separate table. So then it became a one-to-many automatically. So that resolved the issue, and that was pretty simple. I mean, if you have multiple tables, all you do is just find the select distinct of it. You mostly, if you have like an indexed table on-prem, or even if you have, I mean, if you have it on Azure or something, it's in column store indexes on those are pretty great. So if you have any kind of indexes on those columns that you would create those distinct lists, might speed up your process a lot faster, a lot more. Sorry, I don't have a demo for that exactly, but that's the concept you would use. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Murali.
All right, let me go to this. So again, Power Query. No, I did show you that star schema. The star schema. I don't have a necessary star schema here. This is just for our presentation purposes. I threw some of these to show some of the calculations and things like that. So so I could for instance do some of these items. Let me do advanced editor. I don't know how many are familiar with this view, but so whenever there's how I could create like next steps, like in this case I'm doing a duplicated column to get this plus 30 date. So contact date plus 30. So it's just adding 30 days just for our understanding purposes. I just created an additional column. So in this particular case, the source itself is a native query. You can see I just did like select 1,000 of all this particular table. Now I have done all these applied steps, and I have done. So what that, first of all, native query, just the way I have it cannot be query folded. Query folding is very important, which is also an upcoming topic, but you can see that we can avoid some of these steps by moving all these, like filtered rows. What do I have? I do have to do this here, range start and range end. But even if I could push it, I would push it to the source. Duplicate, I would push it to the source. So when I do it, all I would have to do is, if I have this source query, think of this as a data warehouse, and I'm just selecting it from that particular table. Instead, if I had that data warehouse itself, that additional column which has contact date plus date add, 30 days, that would be faster. Mashup engine doesn't have to do that specifically. So can Power BI do a step? Yes, it's great. It can do a lot of things, but that doesn't mean we have to do it here. So this step, unnecessary. Push it back to the source. So identifying those kind of things, what you want to have in Power BI. Is this something that can happen in the source? Yes. If it is yes, then do it in the source. Don't do it here. All right, so that is the thing about applied steps. I could push it, move it to the source and things like that. Next quick item, going kind of step back. So first you create the Power Query, everything you pull data in, pulling data in, you get point and grab from your source. And then the next step, you do very little transformations on your Power Query because you have mostly pushed all of it to your source. Power Query is just like a staging. I mean, it doesn't even do any calculations. It's just raw stage, bare bone staging. And then, of course, I mean, if you have to use it for incremental refresh and things like that, you have to look at it here. So again, you can see range start range end for that coming up pretty quickly, which is our next step. You can see, which is Power BI incremental refresh. So you guys might be, I mean, if you're using Power BI for a while, you're familiar with Power BI Incremental Refresh. Please use it. It's very helpful, especially if your data set is large. Again, it depends on what large is. But technically, if it is even like small, yeah, unless you have only like 100 rows or 1,000 rows at the max, I would always partition my data set. By default, I try to partition my data set so that it automatically becomes I mean, muscle memory, but also it becomes a useful thing for my Power BI data set itself. So how do I do incremental refresh? Pretty simple, range start range in parameters that I just showed you. Just make sure it's a date time field in your table. So apply it on your fact table, and sometimes dimensions too, depending on the type of dimensions you have. If you have SADs and stuff like that. But again, remember that I mentioned, in our case, the record create date time and record update date time that I apply for incremental refresh using only the date part of it, even though there's a date time. It's a date time field. In the table metadata says the column is a date time column, but it is storing only the date part of it when I'm using my stored procedure or my data bricks, whatever I'm using. And secondary, but that's like very primary thing that we try to do, monthly partitions. We have a ton of data. We try to do yearly partitions. It still does have a performance hit from what we have gone through, and we had to switch some of our data sets that we created. So data set, I mean, it's trying to store a ton of data for a year, or if you're trying to store 5 years worth of data. Even if I'm trying to store 5 years worth of data, I say 16 months instead of 5 years. So the partitions happen monthly. So older dates don't really get updated often, so I don't have to worry about the refreshing of that part of the data set, but still however I am creating my solution, or my end users are creating their own reports or whatever, their solutions will all be already efficient, and my capacity is not getting there are not spikes that are causing data set evictions because of all of this. So there are not larger, or it doesn't run for too long and things like that. And also another thing monthly partitions help is, let me quickly show this too. This is a side thing I did not plan, but this might be helpful if you're not familiar. But in the back end of Power BI services is an SSIS cube. So if I'm connecting to my Power BI, quickly. All right. So if I'm connecting to my Power BI cube through SSMS, in this case, so you can have like visual idea. So if I'm connecting to a data set and a particular table that I'm looking for, in this case, my fact table is this, and I look at the partitions. Okay, I want to have them monthly. If I have really huge tables that sometimes, some of the refreshes, part of the partitions only worked in your underlying logic, or it has to be changed. It's a lot more easier to refresh the monthly partitions coming here when you have a logic change, especially when the data is really huge and the data set itself takes really long time to run. It's not ideal for a data set to run for a really long time, but if that is the case, you want to target partitions and things like that. I mean, of course, you could use XML endpoints. You could create, or you could do API calls. You could do a ton of things in the back end using C#, PowerShell, whatever you guys want to or are comfortable with. Do the targeted partition refreshes, so you're not changing a ton of data at the same time. If you want, you only look at few data points and you're only changing that. In this particular case, this is a real data set, and we are only starting to track this information from this year. So we have only data from this year, which is starting 2022. This is our KPI dashboard related data. So only data for this year. But you can see it's all partitioned in rows, and if anything happens, I can only target that partition. My UI has a ton of visuals in it. So when it uses this, it uses the partition. It's a little bit more efficient rather than when I had it as a single partition without incremental refresh. All right. So going back to Power BI incremental refresh. So store monthly and refresh daily for inserts only. So this part on the right, you can see, gives you an idea of how the incremental refresh piece is. So this particular case, this I took from the documentation, but pretty much that's how it is wherever you do it. So the first one is where how much data you store. 5 years worth of data I'm storing. Again, since this came from Microsoft Docs, it's showing years. Otherwise, it would be 16 months. For us, it's always months. And then if I'm only doing inserts, then I can just do the past 1 day. Or if you're doing a weekly refresh, then 7 days. Or if you want to be careful, like maybe 10 days. So you miss one schedule, then you have a following schedule that could quickly pick up that failed refresh. So the incremental refresh happens only on those smaller chunks. This is only for inserts. If your data has only inserts, no updates, or mainly no updates. Store refresh, detect data changes. So this one is the part where we use the record create and record update date time. Even for this, we use that. So everything uses the record create date time to do the store monthly and refresh daily. So that particular range start range end that I showed in my case, in my data set. So this, I have used it on all things, but the filtered rows, you can see that I'm using it on the contact date in this particular case, which would be if I created that Power BI PBI DS, that would have the record create date time here. And that is what I would be using for my range start range end. Unfortunately, I cannot show any of our PBI DS data or Power Queries here. But you can see, this would be the same case. Instead of contact, it will be that. So that is for the create date time. What is this update date time? So when I go back, and actually let me show it here itself so you guys can see from scratch. Like if I do it on this one, and refresh. Set that up. Maybe the wrong one. I'll just switch it here. So OT, it uses that contact date, the range start range, and so I can add the incremental refresh. So if I do like the last, 24 months of data, but I want to only refresh, like I said, remember when I said, for healthcare, a lot of things keep changing even after the transaction is never complete. The records do keep changing, especially if you're familiar with Epic, how the data is in your organization too. So transaction, the same record can be updated 6 months down the line. So I want to refresh last 6 months worth of data. But in this particular case, if it's only insert, I'm doing only 1 day or 7 days, or a weekly one, or 10 days in case you want to be careful. So last 10 days of data, whenever I'm weekly refreshing, it's going to pick that up and refresh that data. So that is for inserts only. The detect data changes is very helpful. I'm gonna have to use this. No, this one has it. Okay. The detect data changes is the next one, which uses that update datetime field that I said. That update datetime is the one that tags when your logic has updated recently, since the time you initially got that. So it could be like your billing post date. Once it is posted, something got voided or the pair changed or something. So that particular transaction is now updated with a new pair. So then, even though the post date is like 2 months ago, the pair was updated yesterday. And so you, in your cert procedure, tag that update. The record update date time happened yesterday. So then you're going to use that in this detect data changes when there is an update. For this alone, we tried various methods. If you know that your data changes only until the last 6 months or something, then you could do that. But we were not very sure about that. So in some of our cases, we just did the same thing as 24 as our archive data. Some people might feel this is taboo, but this was the only way we could capture all our updates without missing anything. So we don't want any missed data. We don't want any underrepresentation or anything. So this is how we do it. But also this is almost very similar to truncate and full truncate and reload. So instead of that, doing a detect data changes. And when I click this, it gives me another date time field. So remember I added the plus 30. So 30 days later, something changed. So then I just do that, select that. So in here is the update date time field that you're going to use. So whenever it'll find out all the partitions that have something changed in them, it'll only refresh those partitions. In our case, it's going to be monthly. So monthly data would be refreshed for that partition, and only refresh those data in the last 24 months if the date time column has changed. So if only that column has changed, only the record update date time is yesterday, then change this. Otherwise, keep going on. Keep moving on. So this is the way we had implemented for those that you need insert and update. Update mainly. I hope that was a little bit more helpful. And I also have like a kind of like a cheat sheet. Sorry. Let me see. Let me see the cheat sheet. I have an incremental refresh cheat sheet that here. I'll just show a glimpse of it right now, but I will show. I'll also give it to Gary so he can post it in this YouTube along with this YouTube video, and also along with this meetup group thingy event. This is just for your understanding. I put something together roughly so you understand. When your table date starts at a specific time and you store 24 months of data or refresh how many months of data, you plug in these values and say, this is when my table starts. This is when my this is the storage month. This is my refresh month, and then you try to plug in some values here to figure out how long it's going to store data or not. Then you'll kind of get the next field. For instance, in this case, if I am on July 2023, if my table started in 2022, 24 months of storage and 16 months of refreshed data, the stored data set starts at 1/1/2022. The refresh, when it'll start refreshing, so 1/1 to 2/28/2022, data will not be refreshed. It'll just be stored in your data set. So you can see that, data stored but not refreshed. So again, and then from 3/1 to the rest of the time, like right before the July 1st date, data gets refreshed. 1/1 to 6/23 is the data stored date. So until then, the entire data is stored. So you can try this. You can add new rows and check, like quick thing to understand. And also I created some quick understanding thing for other incremental refresh, like, if you have data like this. So initially you have like 5 records, and then you do full load, then it takes longer time to process the data, but it does come up with on 2022 is the data set run, captures the prior day's data. So it captures 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 primary keys, primary key values, and everything for that particular ID, all the columns, just a representation of that. 1.13, the next day when all these happens, all these rows are also captured in full truncate and reload. We don't want that. It's not the preferred method at all. It's the least preferred method. Second one is incremental refresh with create date, but you do 1 month store, for example, and 1 day of refresh. What happens is on 1/2, you get this, which is good. Always 1/2 works fine. It's just the initial data that I'm showing as an example here. Again, this is just like a quick reference. You could use this, and maybe you can enhance this too as you keep using this. That'll be pretty good. And if you want to post it back, that'll be great. But just for a quick understanding. But if you just use it with create date and not the update date, because there are some data changes for the same record. In this case, no change means that did not change. And of course, modified data means that record was changed with something, like a new pair was added. So the old pair was taken out, new pair was added. So then if you just use create date, then what we saw happen was that it kept adding, it depended 2 and 5 again. So if you, in your data set, called out that that particular ID column is the primary key, then the data set would fail. It failed for us. So duplicate records don't get tagged or they don't get updated. They get added to the existing data if you do it this way, using only create date. If you do create date without the update date and use 1 month in the store, when I say store, this, I close incremental refresh, but this incremental refresh piece, store and refresh, that's the part I'm referring to. So that is the 1 month storing, 1 month refresh of data. If you do that, that's pretty much doing truncate and doing a full load, doing truncate and reload. But this is going to be even longer. It's going to take longer than doing a full load. Not using incremental refresh, if you just let the table load fully, will be a lot faster than if you use this method without the update date, because it has to figure out every partition and it tries to reload every partition every day. So it takes a lot more time. Sometimes it will time out because there's a 2-hour timeout or something like that per query. The last one is the ideal method, which is using that for inserts and updates. When you have create date, and like I just showed you, use the update date to tag that in your warehouse and use that in the data set, then ideal solution shows up. The lines that had 2 and 5, those get changed, those get updated in your data set. So there's not an additional 2 and 5 IDs. And but however, so now what to do in case you want your Power BI itself to do that kind of keeping track of data before without it changing in your source, or doing that SCD, but capturing the SCD. So you can do reporting, time-based reporting that you can say, how was it when, almost like auditing. How was the state of this when it was back at this date before this change happened. So think about that. Again, I'll make this available. I'll give it to Gary. You can use that.
Is it okay for a question, Murali?
Sure.
Yeah, so the question is, are you creating the partition manually for the new month? Or is the new partition for a new month getting created automatically?
So whenever data refresh happens, we schedule all our data sets for once monthly. Some of them, even though we do monthly partition, it's a daily data refresh that is scheduled. So we don't manually do it. It automatically does it during that scheduled refresh. For the stored procedure, if it's on-prem or ADF, we schedule that stored procedure to run automatically too, using that same. We have some, like settings on it. So for instance, in the stored procedure that I'm using, I have a begin date, end date, and mode. So I know if it's running for a particular date. Like yesterday, I run it every day. If I run it every day, then it's yesterday's date that I automatically have set it down here. So this is a daily one. So it has a T-1 date there. So stored procedure automatically runs, the data set automatically runs. So the partitions are not manually done. It is automatically refreshed every day or weekly or monthly, whatever your data set and stored procedure does. Okay.
Does that answer the question, Sam? Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thanks. All right. The next couple of things I'm going to go through real quick, as I am running out of time. So again, last time I spoke about developer experience. So keep in mind how we feel when we develop the solution. We don't want to feel frustrated. We want to feel that we did something exciting, have that challenge. Still, we're able to give the user something they really wanted, they didn't even think about. So have that always in mind. By doing some of these things, like I mentioned, applied steps and query folding. I did talk about query folding a little bit. Look that up. Query folding is very necessary. So again, mashup engine, the Power BI data set doesn't do a lot of lifting or calculations or changes. It doesn't have to do all that. And everything is pushed to the source. In this case, as a quick example, all these I could apply to an applied step, and I can push it up to the source itself where, so native SQL, that's right. So I have this native SQL right here. Sorry, 1 second. Why is this giving me a trouble? One of these I have, okay, got it, this one. So query folding real quick, I'm gonna show something. Again, this is something people might not really understand or might not pay close attention to. So I have a ton of applied steps. This is a very simple concept, so I'm not gonna go in depth about it. But just the way where it is and how query folding happens, you look at this, right click on an applied step, and you can get a list of items, and you see view native query. What that means is it's sending a source query to your source, and it says, hey, give me this information. If it does that, then that query is foldable, and that is very easy for your mashup engine to get all that information and not do much. Transformation still has to happen. But in the case down here, you can see when I look at it, it is disabled. That means it's not foldable. What that means is it has to bring it back into the data, into the Power BI service, and it has to do that calculation on the service instead of sending that entire code back to the source. So if I am right, one of these steps I have up here is, so I mean, I could move these steps around. So let's say this is a necessary step that I have somewhere around here, but I really, yeah, until here is where you query foldable. Okay, so it is query foldable till here. But let's say for some reason, this step that is not query foldable is all the way up here. So then what it does to my entire query, the rest of the query, is none of these parts are query foldable. It's because so this way. Okay, yeah, none of these parts are query foldable. It throws all of these out. So all of these other steps have to happen within Power BI service. It's really slow in that case. In this case, all I would have to do, I mean, you can see in this case, see, it's not query foldable anymore. Only, I mean, I cannot query fold any step after this remove other columns. So right after this, it stops. I cannot, oh, that works too. Only this expanded, that's the one I moved up, sorry. So 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, fifth step, it stops query folding. In this case, all I have to be vigilant about is making sure to know where I have to have this applied step happen. In some cases, you cannot avoid it. The best thing, again, is to move that calculation to the source as much as possible. If not, in this particular case, I know for a fact that I can do this expansion somewhere down here. So again, now if I try somewhere down here, it becomes query foldable till that step. Be refreshing, quickly refresh. All right, so yeah, again, it's query foldable till here. So now I can send, so now until this step, my source, my Power Query can quickly grab that data and have it ready for the rest of the transformations. So keep that in mind, again, something that will help you out a lot. The other thing is calculation groups. It's very important and necessary. So calculation groups, it's a huge topic. Maybe I will do a separate thing on how calculation groups would happen and query folding would happen and everything. And even the limiting data, I think that bonus, I think we are running late, so I might not be able to do it this time. Maybe if there's a future chance I would do how you can limit data in Power BI desktop when you're viewing like millions of records that your desktop cannot load, how you can limit when you're actually creating the data set, data model and everything, okay? But calculation group is very important. Use calculation groups. If you don't know about it, please learn about it. Calculation groups are very essential. A lot of times it reduces the number of measures. If you have like 20 measures, if they're somehow related to each other, they can reduce from 20 to just a few. So that way, maintenance wise, it is easy for you. You can store the metadata in the backend. So again, if there's another part that I could do, I also have a ton of, I have some PowerShell scripts I wrote to get the metadata using REST, the API calls from Power BI service. So I'll also show a little bit of that. It helps you see these kind of backend formulas that are stored in calculation groups. So calculation groups, if you don't know what it is, please do. And they also can help you toggle between relationships. And just in the thing of time, I will show a quick teaser. In this particular case, I have a toggle between date and date plus 30, date B30. That in this particular case, you can see, just to quickly show you that the row count it's showing is 82 for this. But if I switch to a different one, this is actually done using calculation group in the backend. So again, a teaser for the calculation group. I would go through this at a different time. The same thing, if I move this, however, to beyond like 20th, that's gonna bring the data for that particular date. And again, I will go through this in depth, but if I go through the date, it's giving me blank row count, as you can see. So what here I'm doing is, in case you have a fact table that has like two separate dates, I am switching between like an active and an inactive relationship. A lot of times in like healthcare, if you have like a post date and a service date on the same table and you want to switch between those, a toggle like this is helpful. I mean, now it does come with performance hit and everything, but calculation group can make this possible. And you can see, I mean, I have a calculated group created. Now how to create it, everything again, due to time, I do want to keep it at time next time. Another part, if we're planning on doing, which I'm totally open to, if we have some interest, we'll definitely do that in third part. And also one other item, like I said, the limiting data also, I'll keep it for another part. But one of the key things I was hoping to talk about was row level security. If you are familiar with row level security, how we implement row level security, we have it in our template and stuff like that. Row level security gives you data at the row level, so you can say who can view what data. So in our case, it's people having access to certain locations, certain hospitals only can view their data. So it's a format like that. So another time when I do that, I'll show in depth how we did the backend, how we did the AD groups, and how we do the RLS user too in the back and stuff like that. There's another concept called object level security. You can do a similar thing, but at the column or the table level. So row level security, object level security is at the column or the table level. You can decide which user gets to see what tables and what columns. And finally, I mean, one of the subset of object level security that I kind of came with the visual level security, which also there is a small thing. Again, I'll show you a quick teaser before I'm done with this. Will be a teaser, not for another time, how I would achieve this, how I would achieve this to show. Look at this particular table, and I would show you quickly again before I'm done with this how the RLS itself, the particular VLS or the visual level security works. Let me pick one of my directors. I don't know if she would want her name call it or something, but just generally picking her. I don't know if she has access to it. Okay, so as you can see, one of the columns now became unavailable to her. So only I can view that data, not her. I mean, in this case, anybody who you don't want to see, that's the visual level security. They really cannot see that. It's a little bit more intense performance wise, but again, these are the things that I want to talk in the future if there are interests. I know I'm a minute over, so I really appreciate. Thank you so much for hanging on and listening to this. If you guys still have any questions, I would be happy to hang on and answer any of those, but I would respect other people's time. So if you want to hop off, please feel free to do so. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Murali. That's fantastic. We'll hang out for a minute or two, see if we have any questions.
All right.
I just wanted to thank you. That was fantastic content, and looks like we need to have you back for session 3. Between the questions that we had and the content that remaining, we definitely have enough for another session. So really appreciate you coming out today and sharing with us your experience at over the past couple of years and at SSM. And also I wanted to say congratulations on your new promotion.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
It's always exciting, right?
Yes, definitely.
Terrific presentation, Murali, and congratulations on the promotion. Well
Thank you.
deserved.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Julie.
Well, we
Yeah,
have
for-
somebody,
Yeah,
we
go
have
ahead.
someone typing, but let's see if we
For-
have anybody speaking.
Yeah, for people who don't know, also, I mean, Julie and I are on a part of the, we are in the same company. She is our DBA, so on-prem, everything. We go through her, all the permissions. We did come up with a template, so anytime people who don't follow some standards or something, she usually asks me or Tom, and she's like, "Hey, can you make sure this is good?" And so we have a good working relationship. So when you have DBAs, please have good working relationships with them. Be very helpful, and also the same thing with warehouse developers. So you can get your things done fantastically.
I have a quick question. So it's a question in regards to my earlier questions for partitioning.
Sorry, it's you're a little bit.
Is it better now?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, this is in relates to my earlier question for the partitioning.
Oh, the
So-
partitions. Okay.
Yeah. So I got the point where you can refresh the partition, and we're setting up refresh intervals in the Power BI service. But how about creation of partition when the data is generated for next month, let's say. So is the
Sorry,
Power BI
when
service
the data is where?
when the data is generated for next month? Or
Yes.
if you're getting like a new data, right? So is the partitioning taken care by Power BI service in terms of creation, or Power BI service just take care of a refresh?
So it has to be done at two levels. One, in your source, there has to be some way your source notifies or has that information saying that this is when a particular record was created, and this is when it was updated last. That information has to be in your source, or if you create a data warehouse, it has to be in that data warehouse. That the data set the Power BI service uses, when you use that incremental refresh, it uses that information that you have used in the incremental refresh to store and refresh parts. That is partitioning. When I show that store and refresh, that is called that is partitioning. That automatically partitions it to months. It divides that data into months. When you
So Power BI service automatically does the partition, right?
sorry,
it does. Shown in
sorry,
and
I
shown
couldn't.
in the SSMS.
Yeah.
When you have shown in the SSMS, when you connect to this model, it is showing the list of partition. Does that mean Power BI service does all of these partition, or somebody have to do it?
So I had to do that in my Power BI desktop. I have to go and set that range start range end, use it in my fact table in the Power Query that I showed you a little bit ago. So if you do that, use the range start range end, and then when you go to incremental refresh here, you'll be able to see that. Did I do something? Did I mess it up? Oh yeah, sorry. Viewing as somebody else. Sorry. Hold on. So when I do this, I did not change anything in my data set. But I mean, I guess.
I think you just click discard changes on the yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, when I do this, I have to manually make sure I put in the partitions here. So when I say 24 months, that's the partition that I'm selecting. So 24 months, when I say this and I put this PBIX file in Power BI service, that's when I am able to see these partitions. So then Power BI service will show me all these partitions for 24 months. The way the partitions themselves refresh is based on the schedule. So when I do when I go to like Power BI, where's my Power BI? Right here. So when I go to one of these, so this is my data set. When I go to the data set, sorry, what am I trying to, oh yeah, the incremental refresh. All I do is just publish the data set. I can show you the parameters here. Give me 1 second. I mean, basically what I'm trying to say is just that those parameters are there. You would see that it is doing, I mean, I'm setting the schedule. Where are you? Right here. Oh yeah. So the schedule refresh is right here. So in this case, it is development, so I don't have it scheduled, but when I schedule it on a daily basis or something, the service itself will update these partitions. It will update based on what you set here. If it's daily or weekly or monthly, whatever it is, then that will decide how your partitions are refreshed.
Got it. And so it will just retain the 24, and as the new data is coming, it will automatically looks like it is creating that. But all what you need to do is just to define how many months you would like to retain. That's pretty much it, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, yeah, that piece has to be in the data source, and you have to do that incremental refresh. And when you set the schedule, then that orchestration has to happen. And then Power BI dataset will do it.
In the SQL Server side, you're not doing anything. Right? I just want to clarify that part. It's happening only on the Power BI server side for a data set level.
The partitioning itself is happening only on the Power BI service side. Exactly.
On the server side. Got it.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah,
I'm not
you.
doing, yeah, I'm not doing any orchestra. I don't have any flow or any business trigger, or I don't have any triggers. I don't have any business logic that says, you know, after something happens in my source, then do this. No, none of those kind of logic happens. Yeah, exactly. Logic happens separately in source. We implicitly do it and make sure that it is orchestrated at the right time to happen in Power BI service. So basically, if my stored procedure runs, if it's a daily one, if it runs at 8 a.m., it takes like 5 minutes to run in the SQL agent, and I make sure I give ample time. So 9 a.m. is when I schedule my data set for the incremental refresh to capture the data. And the partitioning automatically happens in data set in the service. All right. Thank you
very much for explanation.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Any other questions? Any other questions? No. All right. Okay. I think with that, I really appreciate it. I thank you guys so much for listening. Sorry we ran a little over, and that definitely means there's a third part. Sometimes.
Yeah, that's very good.
All right. Thank you so
Thanks
much.
a lot,
guys.
Murali.
Thanks
you.
again.
See you guys later.
Good night.
Bye.
Thanks.
Don't forget to stop the recording. Oh, I think he already left.
Uh-oh, yeah. I think you can do it, Julie. You're also an admin. You might be able to